Welcome everyone to Average Football Talk, the most average football talk show ever. Anthony Miller back here, and we're going to try little things a little differently this time around. I decided I'm going to use my iPhone and use my AirPods to see if I would make the video and audio quality better. But the show is called Average Football Talk, so you kind of signed up for this crap, so it's on you if you don't like anything. Anyway, let's get to football talk. I know I didn't get to record the episode on yesterday on Tuesday, and that's because it has been a hectic few days in terms of the NFL. It's a very busy time with NFL roster cut down just happened on Tuesday with everyone going to 53-man rosters. And then today or Wednesday, we got the practice squads being put together with 16 players being able to be added up to it. Six players can be veterans, with the rest can be first or second year players. So a lot of activity, a lot of movement going on, and of course, I felt it was the best, the best way to kind of start this for me for NFL talk is obviously talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. I feel like they've been the most active team among all the NFL teams going on, so I just felt like it was kind of the right place to start. Howie Roseman, general manager, you know him. He is one that's going to be wheeling and dealing every single time. And I feel like he did a lot of work over the last week plus, but the moves that he made were very telling of what he thought about the roster. And, there was all this talk in the offseason with the Eagles about the defense and the defense being very young. I think it was about 9 out of the 11 projected starters going into training camp were under the age of 25. So I think there was a lot of concern from everyone whether, are they too young? Do they have enough experience? Are, some of the younger guys ready to step up into starting roles? You look at guys like Nolan Smith Jr. and Jalen Hunt and Sidney Brown and Andrew Bakumba, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, all these young guys. Like, are they ready to step up and be starters? But the moves that Howie Roseman's been making the last like week plus has been very telling for me to say I think he's a little more focused on the offense in the last week plus. You look back at not this previous Sunday, but the Sunday before that. He made a big trade to go get John Mechie the third from the Houston Texans, the wide receiver, which was a very telling move and ended up being a really smart move at the end of the day because a few days later, Johnny Wilson ends up injuring his leg and ends up being out for the rest of the season. So that ended up being a great move on Howie Roseman part, where he almost played, sidekick and kind of knew what was coming. So that was an interesting move initially when John Mechie was added, just because of how deep the wide receiver position was. From obviously AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson are kind of the main guys. But now, as we know, Darius Cooper, who, the undrafted rookie from Tarleton State, has really stepped up and looked really good in training camp and preseason. Um, Became early on a fan favorite, and as we all know, now he's on the 53-man roster. You got Anelia Smith and Johnny Wilson kind of battling out for that fourth or fifth spot. And then you got here John Mechie coming out of nowhere, and he ends up stealing a roster spot from, now we know, Nelia Smith, who ended up getting cut and is now on his way to Carolina to join the Panthers practice squad. So the receiving core was really deep already, and that didn't even include guys like. Um, Terrence Marshall to, Elijah Cooks, guys who also had really good camps, but for them, the problem was they got injured. So that ended up really screwing up their opportunity of making the roster and ended up hurting them. That kind of made it a interesting predicament at the receiving core. And, Jim Mechie was just kind of a weird add into it, but at the end of the day, it ended up being a great move because now the Eagles receiving core is so much better now for it, and now they have a really deep five receivers, group there on the 53-man roster, and then you got Terrence Marshall and Elijah Cooks who are now on the practice squad. So this Eagles team is fully loaded on the receiving core, but it was just kind of interesting that they did get Ja'Cory and Bennett a couple weeks back from the Las Vegas Raiders at cornerback. So it felt like the Eagles. I think a lot of people thought they were going to do more when it comes down to focusing on defense. But from John Mechie, the third, about a week or so ago, and then you come from this weekend where on Sunday Howie Roseman, I I don't know if he has any plans for Sunday or wants to take off, but he decided to execute three trades just out of nowhere. So you got Sam Howell, quarterback from the Vikings, who was traded to the Eagles. A really interesting pickup there from Philly. Um, I cover the Vikings for the Viking Age for Fansided. So I've kind of seen both perspectives from covering the Eagles and covering the Vikings. And to be honest with you, I just never was a big fan of Sam Howell in this preseason. Max Brosmer, who was an undrafted rookie out of Minnesota, I thought he outperformed Sam Howell in training camp and preseason with Minnesota. So I think that kind of led to the Vikings thinking, well, maybe we need to trade Sam Howell, and then ultimately led to Carson Wentz, former Philadelphia Eagles starting quarterback, former franchise quarterback, former Anthony Miller defender of him, ended up getting signed to Minnesota to be the backup to JJ McCarthy, and then Sam Howell ends up getting traded to the Eagles. The quarterback situation is kind of weird right now with Philadelphia, especially with Tanner McKee. Nick Sirianni has never been big on talking about injuries and when players are coming back, but there's just so much uncertainty on when Tanner McKee's going to come back, and it just kind of intensified it more with the trade for Sam Howell. So while I think Howell will make a formidable backup for the time being, we definitely need Tanner McKee back soon, and hopefully he can come back within a month. Just because Jalen Hurts is always known for maybe losing 1 or 2 games a year to being injured, it's really important that the Eagles are able to one keep Hurts healthy first and foremost, but also making sure that Tanner McGee can get back on the as the backup as quickly as possible. And really, this was all intensified because of Kyle McCord and Dorian Thompson Robinson, who the both of them just didn't have good enough preseasons and training camps. It was just really rough to watch Kyle McCord play. I think he had some nice moments in preseason, probably more than Dorian Thompson Robinson, but McCord just still struggled. I mean, he only completed about 42% of his passes, down 2 picks. It was a bit rough to watch McCord play. I think the Eagles were really hoping he would develop like Tanner McKee did a few years back, because Tanner McKee, as everyone knows, he's always been a preseason warrior. He's always been great during the preseason. He's always proven like he probably could have been a backup quarterback a couple years ago as a rookie. And I think the Eagles just kind of assumed that it was going to happen with Kyle McCord, and it just never did. And that's been kind of the most disappointing part if you're an Eagles fan. And then Dorian Thompson Robinson, I mean, we kind of already knew what we were going to get out of him. He threw 1 touchdown and 10 interceptions with the Cleveland Browns. He's a trash quarterback. I mean, I hate to be like very blunt about it, but I mean, come on, guys, let's be honest. He is an absolute trash quarterback and had no business being in that QB3 battle with the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles only made that trade with Dorian Thompson Robinson, just because they wanted to offload Kenny Pickett because they knew Tanner McKee was going to be the backup. So they wanted to, give Kenny Pickett an opportunity to start or be a backup elsewhere in Cleveland. And as we all know, that didn't quite happen exactly because Kenny Pickett is now a Las Vegas Raider after getting traded from Cleveland, which was, I don't, he didn't even last 6 months and he was already traded. So that's a whole debacle in itself, which I will be discussing later in the week in one of the episodes. Definitely need to break down the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation because that's a whole mess in itself. But anyway, DTR, we already knew what we had in him. He's a good mobile quarterback, but he's not accurate. He makes bad decisions, and honestly, at this point, like, is he going to get another NFL shot? Probably, but I mean, his time is almost running up. I just don't see how people can keep employing this guy to be a quarterback for your team. Then again, guys like Peterman, who's arguably been one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history, always seems to keep getting backup jobs, and Tim Boyle seems to always get backup jobs. So, I guess if people want to have that type of quarterback who just fails, but is just good enough to, be a body on the roster, then so be it. So, at the end of the day, the hope is with McCord being on the practice squad now that maybe he'll develop, learn this year, and then next year kind of take that leap into the QB3 job. But for now, it looks like Jalen Hurts will be the starter. McKee, when he's healthy, he'll be the backup, and Sam Howell will be the third string. Not a bad quarterback room. But, the Sam Howell move is kind of feel the same way as I felt about Kenny Pickett trade, that trade last year where I was kind of like, I mean, it's all right. It's not great. Doesn't excite me, but at least it's good enough. So then after the Sam Howell trade later in the day, there was Fred Johnson, the former swing tackle for the Eagles, who was playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars up until Sunday, and the Eagles decided to trade for him as well for a day three draft pick, which I thought was a really good move for the Eagles because the offensive line, especially the depth of the offensive line, has not been great. You got guys like Kendall Lamb and Keegan who really struggled in the last preseason game against the New York Jets, and both of those guys are no longer on the roster. So I think there were some necessary moves that needed to be made on the offensive line, and I think the Eagles kind of realized that the veterans they brought in particular were the ones that were struggling the most, and that's kind of where the biggest disappointment was. Outside of Matt Pryor, who I thought has had a good camp and obviously made the roster now. And Brett Toth's been really good for the Eagles as well, stepping in for Landon Dickerson while he's gone through his injury. But even like Kenyon Green, when the Eagles traded for him to from the Houston Texans, part of the C.J. Gardner Johnson trade. I don't think a lot of people had a lot of high expectations for Kenyon Green, but at the same time, kind of thought he was, beginning of camp, you kind of thought, well, maybe he'll make the roster and be a good backup for them, but he couldn't even do that. And, he struggled himself. He couldn't even stay healthy for a part of camp. Like that was a massive disappointment for the Eagles, where a lot of people thought maybe, Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, can come in and develop Green and maybe get him to his full potential from being that first round pick a few years back for Houston. But it just didn't happen. So that was really disappointing in itself. So, overall, what usually is a strength of this offense with the offensive line, the starters are great, but the backups have not been so great. So, they bring in Fred Johnson, who's got experience. He jumped in for Jordan Matalata last year at the left tackle position. He played well. And then the Eagles decided to trade Darian Kennard to the Green Bay Packers for a day three draft pick, which I mean, I don't know if Kennard was going to even make the roster in the first place, so probably a good spot for him to kind of move off and get an opportunity to play for the Packers. But yeah, to me, I think Howie Roseman was kind of speaking a little bit highly about, without saying it, speaking about the offense needing a little more help than the defense, which is kind of surprising because I do feel like defensively, Howie Roseman has to take some looks at maybe bringing in some edge rushers. Uh, I don't think that position group has really done, particularly well. Josh Oche's been good as a backup. Like Aziz Ojulari, he got better as the preseason went on and training camp went on, but those first 2 3 weeks, he was just really slow off the gates, and I don't really feel like a lot of those edge rushers, that are backing up Hunt and Smith really step up defensively for them. Going to be interesting what the Eagles are going to do if they're going to bring in an edge rusher. How much work is going to be done there, and then offensively, are they done putting in the work? Because it seems like they've put in a lot of effort to, come in there, fix the offensive line, fix the offense in general and get some depth there. So that might be something to monitor throughout the season is that the starters are great for the Eagles, but if there's injuries, there could be a big concern at pretty much most positions outside of maybe running back and wide receiver that the Eagles don't have the depth to really step up and be able to get through it. So could that hinder their Super Bowl championship chances? I don't think so, but it is something that is worth monitoring throughout the year. All right. Well, that's going to be it for the second episode. So make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think about the Eagles and the moves they made. They've been very busy the last couple of weeks. Going to be interesting how Howie Roseman handles everything and see if he does more. Howie's always picking up the phones and making calls. So more deals could be on the way. So let me know what you think. Going to have more football content coming for you soon. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.